Welcome back, deep divers. We're about to jump into a topic that's, well, let's just say it's really got me thinking differently about education.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So we've been looking at some fascinating material about Islamic education in West Africa, right?
Okay, yeah, I'm with you.
And the thing that's blowing my mind is this idea that knowledge isn't just something you learn from a book.
Aha, I see where you're going with this.
It's almost like knowledge gets woven into who you are in this tradition.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. It's not just about memorizing facts, it's about embodying them. It's about knowledge becoming a part of you, almost like.
Like it's in your bones.
Exactly. And that brings us to this phrase I came across that just stopped me in my tracks. Walking Quran. What does that even mean?
Right. I mean, a walking Quran, it sounds almost, I don't know, mystical or something.
Well, it is a powerful image, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it gets to the heart of how knowledge is understood in this context. Think about it. The Quran isn't just seen as a text, it's a living presence in the community.
So it's more than just words on a page.
Way more. People strive to embody the Quran's teachings, not just memorize them. It shapes their actions, their interactions, their whole way of being in the world. They become, in a sense, living texts.
Whoa, that's intense. Okay, but how does that actually, play out? Are we talking metaphor here, or are there, actual practices that reflect this?
Oh, it's way more than just a metaphor. For example, there's this tradition where students would actually drink the water used to wash their wooden Quran tablets.
Wait, seriously? They drank the water?
They did. It's about absorbing the word, taking it in on this deep, visceral level.
I mean, I guess that makes sense in a way. If you believe that the Quran is, like the word of God, then literally consuming it.
It's powerful, right? And this practice is linked to how the Prophet Muhammad is understood. He's seen as the first walking Quran because he, embodied those teachings perfectly.
Wow. So you're telling me this idea of, literally ingesting knowledge, it goes all the way back to the origins of Islam.
It's a fundamental concept. And it shows just how deeply this idea of embodying knowledge is woven into the fabric of this tradition.
Okay, that's amazing. But all this talk about, embodying the Quran and living texts, it makes me wonder about the social side of things. I mean, from what I understand, there's this whole system of clerical lineages and occupational castes in West African Islam, right? So how did that impact access to education? Was it just for, the elite?
Well, West African Islam has always been really diverse with different ethnic groups, professions. It's complex.
Sure.
And yeah, historically, some groups like blacksmiths and griots, traditional storytellers, they were sometimes marginalized.
Really? Because of their jobs?
Yeah, their social status was tied to ideas about ritual purity and things like that.
Interesting.
But here's the thing. Islamic education offered a way to break free from those limitations. Even a slave, if they mastered the Quran, they could potentially gain their freedom.
No way.
Yeah. They could even rise to a respected position in the clerical class. Imagine that.
So knowledge was like a key to social mobility.
Absolutely. It could challenge the existing social order and create opportunities for people to move beyond their prescribed roles.
Okay, so we've got embodied knowledge, social mobility, and I'm guessing this isn't the whole story, right? The source mentions conflicts between clerics and rulers, even full-blown revolutions.
Oh, yeah. Things definitely got heated sometimes. You have to remember, you've got this tension between temporal power, the kings and such, and the spiritual authority of religious leaders.
The Clash of the Titans.
Exactly. Kings needed the clerics for, religious legitimacy and all that, but that doesn't mean they always saw eye to eye.
So it wasn't just about religious beliefs. It was about power dynamics, too.
You got it. And we've got a great example of how this played out. There was this 18th century cleric, Al-Mami Abdul Qadir Khan.
Okay.
And he actually led a revolution against, get this, both the slave trade and the corrupt rulers.
Well, hold on. So we're talking about an African abolitionist movement here, pushing back against slavery even before Europe got on board.
That's right. Al-Mami Abdul Qadir Khan's story just blows apart a lot of the assumptions we have about that historical period.
Seriously, that's incredible.
It shows the kind of power these religious leaders could wield. They weren't just passive figures. They could shake things up, challenge the status quo, even confront European slavers.
Yeah, so we've got embodied knowledge, social mobility, religious leaders leading revolutions. Man, this is way more dynamic than I ever imagined. But hold on, how did Islamic education itself change over time? Didn't modern Arabic schools start popping up in the 20th century? What happened then?
Great question. Lots of things were happening in the 20th century. Colonialism, the spread of new ideas, it definitely had an impact on education.
Right, right.
And you're right, these new schools emerged that were different from the traditional Quranic schools. They placed more emphasis on like literacy, grammar, that kind of thing.
So it was a move away from just memorizing the Quran.
You could say that, but here's the thing, it wasn't like a clean break from the past.
Hmm.
Many of the clerics themselves were actually involved in shaping these new schools.
Interesting.
And that ideal of embodying the Quran, living its teachings, that remained a core value.
So it was more like a blending of the old and the new.
Precisely. It's about adapting to changing times while holding on to those essential principles.
I like that. Got any examples of how this played out in, actual classrooms?
Oh yeah, tons. Some teachers used like notebooks alongside the traditional wooden tablets. Others translated texts into local languages while still, really emphasizing that moral education piece. It was all about finding that balance.
That's cool. It really shows how resilient this tradition is, how it can adapt and evolve while still staying true to itself. But let's shift gears for a second and talk about the Talibé.
The students.
Yeah, the students in Quranic schools. The source mentioned that they often beg for alms as part of their education.
Yes. That's a complicated topic. There are a lot of opinions about the Talibé and their place in society today.
Well, it sounds like it ties into everything we've been talking about. Tradition, social dynamics, the role of knowledge.
It absolutely does.
Mm.
You see, some people view the Talibé as like a burden or a sign of poverty, but others see them as a vital part of the community, providing opportunities for education and even, allowing people to practice charity by giving to them.
So multiple perspectives.
Definitely. And it raises some really important questions for us to think about. How do we balance respecting tradition with modern concerns? How do we make sure these students are thriving in every sense of the word? It's not easy.
Oh, you're right. It's complex. And it sounds like we've only just scratched the surface here. I mean, I came into this deep dive thinking we'd just be talking about like schools and stuff.
Yeah.
But this is so much bigger.
Right. It's about how we understand knowledge itself, how it shapes us, how it shapes society.
It really makes you think.
And that's what we're here for, right? To dive deep and challenge our assumptions.
Absolutely. I'm already looking forward to part 2 of this deep dive. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's make sure our listeners are with us so far. Can we, quickly recap the main points from today?
Sure thing. Let's see, we started with this whole idea of embodied knowledge, right? Where the Quran isn't just something you read, but something you live. And we talked about how students would drink the water used to wash their Quran tablets, literally taking in the word.
Right, and how that links back to the Prophet Muhammad being seen as the first walking Quran. It's incredible how these ideas connect, from everyday practices to the core beliefs of the faith.
Exactly. And then we moved on to the social context, how Islamic education provided a pathway to social mobility, even for those who were traditionally marginalized.
Yeah, like a slave mastering the Quran and gaining their freedom. That was a powerful image.
And then we talked about the power dynamics between religious leaders and rulers and how that could lead to conflict, even revolution.
Al-Mami Abdul Qadir Khan, leading the charge against both the slave trade and the corrupt rulers in the 18th century. Man, that was a story. It really changes how you think about history.
It does, doesn't it? And we wrap things up by talking about the evolution of Islamic education, how modern Arabic schools emerged. But that didn't mean the end of embodied knowledge.
Yeah, the way teachers blended old and new methods, using notebooks and wooden tablets side by side, that was fascinating. It shows how tradition can adapt and still hold on to its core values.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted. This deep dive has been intense, in a good way, of course.
It has. But we're not done yet, are we?
Not even close. We still got so much more to uncover about the Talibé, the role of the Dara in modern society, and the challenges of balancing tradition with contemporary concerns.
It's going to be a fascinating exploration.
I can't wait.
It's a journey, a journey of understanding.
Totally. And you start to realize how much our, typical Western view of education is just, one way of looking at things.
Oh, for sure. We tend to focus so much on the intellectual side, the book learning, that we sometimes forget about the importance of experience.
Right. Like in this West African tradition, knowledge is something you do, not just something you think about.
Exactly. It's about integrating knowledge into your whole being, your actions, your interactions, your entire way of life.
It's like instead of just filling your head with facts, you're shaping who you are as a person.
You got it. And that brings us back to those Talibé we were talking about, the students in the Quranic schools. Their situation is so complex.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. On the one hand, you've got this deep respect for the Dara, the Quranic schools, and the role they play in West African society.
Right. It's seen as this vital institution for transmitting knowledge, for, cultivating religious devotion. And it gives kids access to education who might not have it otherwise.
But on the other hand, there are those concerns about child welfare.
Yeah, that's the tough part. We have to ask ourselves, is this system always working in the best interests of the kids? Are they being exploited?
It's a tough question. And I don't think there are any easy answers.
No, there aren't. But it's a conversation we need to have. How do we honor tradition while also making sure that these kids are safe and well cared for?
How do we find that balance? It's like walking a tightrope.
It is. And it requires us to really listen to all sides, to understand the complexities of the situation. It's not about condemning the tradition outright. It's about making sure it evolves in a way that benefits everyone.
Okay, so big picture here, we started out talking about this idea of embodied knowledge. We looked at some specific examples from West African Islam, the way that knowledge is like literally ingested,
Yeah.
the way that it can be a tool for social change.
Right. We talked about walking Qurans and students drinking the water used to wash their wooden tablets.
We talked about the tensions between religious leaders and political rulers, and that incredible story of Al-Mami Abdul Qadir Khan leading a revolution against slavery and corruption.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did.
Yeah.
But it all comes back to this core idea. How we understand knowledge, how we acquire it, how it shapes us as individuals and as a society.
And how those understandings can vary so much across cultures.
Exactly.
What we've seen with these West African examples is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
One way of knowing among many.
Right. And it challenges us to step outside of our own assumptions and consider other possibilities, other ways of being in the world.
Man, my brain is officially full. In a good way, of course.
Mine too. But you know what they say? There's always more to learn.
Always.
Hmm.
And on that note, we'll be back next time with part 3 of our deep dive, where
We'll tackle those thorny questions about the Talibé, the role of the Dara in modern society, and the challenges of, navigating those tensions between tradition and change.
That's going to be good.
It's about, going beyond just the facts and figures.
It's about seeing the world through different eyes, understanding how other people make sense of their experiences.
And maybe even questioning our own assumptions along the way. Who knows? We might even learn something about ourselves in the process.
I feel like I already have. This whole deep dive has been, like, mind-expanding.
I'm really glad to hear that, and I hope our listeners are feeling the same way.
Speaking of our listeners, I think it's time to wrap things up, but before we do, let's leave them with something to chew on,
Yeah.
One last thought-provoking question.
I like it. Okay, how about this? What are some other ways that knowledge can be, embedded in our lives, not just through books, but through, rituals, relationships, those everyday practices that shape who we are?
Ooh, that's good. It really makes you think about all the different ways we learn and grow, often without even realizing it.
Exactly. It's about looking beyond those formal institutions, those traditional ideas of education, and recognizing that knowledge is all around us, if we just know where to look.
Man, I wish we had more time to explore this. But alas, all good things must come to an end.
For now, at least.
True that. Well, I want to thank you again for taking us on this incredible journey. It's been an absolute pleasure learning from you.
The pleasure was all mine. I always enjoy these deep dives.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this adventure. We hope you've enjoyed exploring the fascinating world of embodied knowledge with us. Keep those questions coming, keep those minds open, and keep diving deep.